Hello, everybody. Welcome back to USC Coliseum Chronicles Live with Casey Kessler, and I am Terrence Holton. This is not USC Primetime Live. We have some of the banner issues back, but this is USC Coliseum Chronicles. This is going to be our last Friday at 10 a.m. episode. We're going to have some actual good times going forward where we can get more of you guys in, get in the chat, and actually get some engaging stuff. But Casey, how are you doing on this fine Friday?
Doing well. I mean, we're literally like 3 weeks away from kickoff, and I think it's like coming really fast out of all of us. So definitely really excited for the season and to talk about it here with you today.
It's fantastic. All right, but Casey, let's jump right in because over the past couple weeks, we have had, not past couple weeks, past week, I will say, we have had people from the USC football team nominated for some awards. And I'm going to share my screen right here, though, because first up, the entire running back room has been nominated for the Doak Walker Award. Of course, that is given to the best running back in the country. I don't know why I lied for a second there. How do you feel about all three getting that nomination? Because I will be honest, I am a little surprised by this.
Yeah, I'm surprised too. I mean, I think it's super encouraging, obviously. I mean, like if that's your situation, that's a very good problem to have.
Yes.
You know, having to divide snaps between the three. But yeah, I'm not gonna lie, I am a little surprised because the only one with true experience at this level is Eli Sanders. And Waymon Jordan, we know he's very talented, but he is coming from the JUCO level. It's not like he's coming from FCS. He's coming from JUCO to the Big Ten. So the adjustment, you know, could be very tough. And then Brian Jackson, a guy who really only played much in the Texas A&M bowl game, and he was good there. But even then, he still doesn't have a ton of experience. Eli Sanders is very good. He showed the most promise at New Mexico, but I honestly think this is a huge surprise to me, but I'm not going to complain whatsoever. What do you think?
Mm-hmm. I think, oh, 1 second. Sorry, I'm having technical difficulties with the screen sharing. I just think that kind of agreeing with you, what you said, it is a little bit surprising. And I do think a lot of these guys have a ton of potential. All of them have so much potential. But, you know, we've mentioned Waymon Jordan. He is coming from that JUCO level. It's going to be a jump. It just is going to be. We do think he can reach that D1, that high D1 level, of course. But going from JUCO, a lot of people who we've talked to about this think that he's instantly just going to be a star. I can't say I completely agree with that, just because he is a JUCO. I don't know what to tell you guys. That's all it is.
Yeah.
Really quickly though, Chris, as per usual, we really appreciate the donation. You're always in our chat, so we love it. You think Jordan is going to be a stud? Maybe I retract my statement. I do think he can make that potential. I just don't know if we'll see it immediately against those Big Ten teams, such as, I'm not going to say such as Purdue, but such as like, you know, Illinois, Michigan, teams like that. But against the Missouri State, Georgia Southern, we'll totally see what he is capable of, at least a little bit of it. We'll get a taste, I think.
Maybe we got to do a Waymon Jordan deep dive because I honestly, I think he's definitely like, I wouldn't say the most polarizing player on the team going into this season. But I think he is one of the most talked about just because USC has had such a good running back room these past few years and beyond. I mean, USC is known as tailback university to some, and these past few years, I mean, you and I have been respectively at the college for 3 and 2 years, and we have seen very good running back rooms. Last year, Woody Marks and Quentin Joyner. The year before that, Austin Jones and Marshawn Lloyd. Like during my time at USC, I've had the privilege to see 4 very good running backs and beyond. But to your point, we've mostly seen transfers come in from the SEC who have a ton of experience. I mean, Lloyd and Marks came in from the SEC, instantly found success at USC. So, I mean, not to say that Eli Sanders, you know, won't be good either, because I think he's going to be very good, but he's still coming from, you know, not a Power 5 school either. So I think it's just one thing, or Power 4, excuse me. I think it's just one thing to think about. You know, these guys have super high ceilings. I think I can agree with that. Where that ceiling will actually be is the question.
Yeah, look, and I'll throw it back to my freshman year. Travis Dye really experienced great back at Oregon for a couple of years, comes down to Southern California before his injury. He was fantastic, obviously, in both the pass game and the running game. Phenomenal pass blocker, probably one of the best pass blockers I've seen at USC. Woody Marks was great too. But I got the list back up here. Brian Jackson, a lot of these guys, Brian Jackson has gotten some of the least amount of snaps at the college level, I will say. It's the only thing I have against him because, we mentioned Jordan obviously is JUCO, but of course he won the JUCO Heisman. So he has seen a lot of snaps at the collegiate level. Brian Jackson hasn't gotten that many, which is why I am a little bit surprised. I'm probably least or most surprised he is here. And I'm not saying that he doesn't deserve to be. I am saying that as in the people who nominated him, the voters, think that a guy who hasn't gotten that many touches at the collegiate level will make that jump, especially in a pretty crowded running back room.
Yeah, I agree, because I think if you think about what his game is like, he's not like an Ashton Genty explosive type running back. He's a power back. He's a guy who's going to get you the 1 yard you need on 4th and 1, 3rd and 1. He's going to get you maybe 3 yards to, make a manageable, 2nd and 7 type of thing. He's not going to run and be electric and get you a 45-yard touchdown up the middle. It's just not going to happen. So I am
argue Genty was both of those last year.
Exactly. He was, but I think Brian Jackson's only one of those. He doesn't have that dynamic
ability. It is also
ability.
unfair to compare anyone to Ashton Genty, though.
Exactly. Well, actually, it is fair because I assume he won this award last year. So, and these guys are
fair enough. Yeah.
So, technically, but going back to Waymon Jordan for a second, because for some reason it's sort of inaccessible to find his stats from JUCO. Not that like they should be taken with 100% certainty because it is JUCO, like you said, but he rushed for 1,600 yards, 134.5 yards per game, 20 touchdowns in 2025 at Hutchinson College, which I think is in Pensacola, Florida, but they play in the Kansas Jayhawk Community College Conference for some reason. If this is the right Waymon Jordan, but those stats sound like it. And I don't know there's that many guys named Waymon Jordan. So just to my point though, I think he's a guy that the ceiling's super high. I think Brian Jackson has a high ceiling, but I don't think it's as high. I agree with you. I think it's not a knock on him. It's just the style he plays.
Yeah, Chris, you're 100% correct. It is the same level of like it's thinking these guys will be great, partially because of maybe the people around them, such as the offensive line, the Mayavas. Maybe they'll be able to open the field up with the receiving game, stuff like that. So you are 100% correct, especially comparing it to like Julian Sayin and Bryce Underwood without having played a game.
Yeah.
They were not the only nominations, so I think we should move on because I know Matt and Ethan touched on them last night. So hold on, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen, move over to the next tab. But Casey, Mekhi Lemon, the only USC receiver to get the Biletnikoff nomination. How do you feel about that?
I'm surprised Jacoby Lane's not there, honestly. I mean, there's a lot of good receivers across the country. I mean, Jordan Tyson at ASU is probably the best one, for being honest, but I'm honestly really shocked that Jacoby Lane, I mean, his ability to be a touchdown creator, I think alone should make him be a nominee here, because I mean, him and Mekhi Lemon are so different. It's kind of like the argument we were talking about with the running backs. It's not that one is much better or much worse. They're just way different receivers. And I guess Mekhi Lemon's game is a lot more appealing to the voters because I understand it. He can play 100-yard game. He can, go for short passes, take the ball far. He can go deep. But Jacoby Lane, I think, is just such a valuable asset to have on the line of scrimmage playing out wide because he's a touchdown creator. He's a human pogo stick. He's a guy that can go up and create opportunities, get you back in games when needed most. I'm very shocked he's not there, and I hope that motivates him to be a great receiver this year again.
Yeah, and I'm just like pulling up the list here. I have the list. I'm looking at the Biletnikoff. There are 50 nominations for the preseason watches. Are you seriously telling me that you don't think Jacoby Lane? I'm not you personally. Are these people seriously telling me that Jacoby Lane is not a top 50 wide receiver in college football?
And if we really want to get more technical, there are odds that came out a couple months ago before this list. I'm looking at odds right now. Jeremiah Smith And by the way, when I said Jordan Tyson was the best, I meant that's entering the NFL draft class. I didn't mean the best
Here, you want
receiver
to
in
share
the
your
country.
screen?
Yeah.
Here,
Let's see.
I'll stop sharing here. I want to mention Chris real
Me,
quick. Yeah, Lane, you are correct, because Lane's problem, and I think everyone thinks this, is as soon as he gets consistent, then he is going to be showed as, or thought of as, a clear top 5 to 10 receiver. Because his problem was he'd go some games 3 receptions, 20 yards, and other games 7 receptions, 100 yards, 2 touchdowns. So that's kind of his problem. As soon as he even gets like a shred of consistency where he's getting, 5 catches, 50 yards, a touchdown, something like that, that is when I think people are really going to notice him as one of the best receivers in the country. That's why in an ESPN way too early mock draft, they had him being taken 18 by the Dallas Cowboys. This, of course, was before the Pickens trade. But that is why, because the potential is so there.
100%. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So these make sense, right? I mean, Jeremiah Smith.
Williams. This is clearly outdated though, because obviously Evan Stewart.
Yeah, this is June 11th. So like take this with a huge grain of salt. This is 2 months old. I mean, of course, not a ton has changed other than the Evan Stewart news. Look at this, Zachariah Branch.
Dude, I actually think that people people who say Zachariah Branch has been great at Georgia did not watch USC games. And I don't want to like disrespect him or anything like that, because he was great that freshman year. He's a fun player. He's a nice guy. The problem with him, I was reading an ESPN article the other day. I'm reading a lot of ESPN promo right now. It was 30 teams who can make the playoff. USC was one of them, and why they can make it. Georgia, one of their reasons they can make it is the upgraded passing game. The first sentence was Georgia's receivers struggled with drops last year. Now they have Zachariah Branch. Are you serious?
That's wild. That's not going to fix your problem.
Dude, he dropped so many. I assume he led the team in drops last year.
I want to. I mean, Deuce Robinson also had that problem, but he was also less of a target. So you're probably right. While we wait, I want to look just one more time and see if I can find a more updated list. Because maybe that'll be a little bit more accurate.
Looking like a betting odds or something like that.
Yeah, that was the first one that came up, but let me try one more time.
Like FanDuel or DraftKings, something like that.
Yes,
yeah, exactly, Chris. You get it. That's why Branch, he totally could be good there. At the same time, I don't trust Gunnar Stockton as quarterback. I don't think he's all that good. I think he's a fine quarterback. He's not better than Carson Beck. The reason that Carson Beck transferred is because nobody liked him, is because people thought he was an asshole. That is why he transferred. And I think they also think that at Miami. But that's why he transferred. So I think when you have a guy who I believe is worse than Jade Maava, or Miller Moss for that matter, throwing you the ball, I don't think it's going to get any better unless it's just going to be like a bunch of dump off plays. Maybe he'll get a bunch of receptions. And yeah, his route running, it wasn't fantastic. It was literally just what he can do in open space. That is his whole, why everyone is so excited about him. It's why people, it's the Tavon Austin, DeAnthony Thomas effect. It's people think there's these little guys, 5'10", 180. He's not that small. But these little guys who, once they get the ball in their hands, they're quick, all sorts of that stuff. Everyone is just trying to recreate Tavon Austin and DeAnthony Thomas with receivers like Branch. And I'm not saying they can't. Branch is nowhere near them. That's all I want to say about that.
Well, also, like, to your point, I mean, to be good in open space, you have to run good routes. And his confidence just seemed so hindered last year. He wasn't even taking kicks out, which he was so good at doing in 2023. Didn't he take back like 2 touchdowns to the house in the first few games?
First game, punt return and kick return touchdown.
That's right.
First freshman since Dory Jackson to do that.
Yeah, that's first game of his collegiate career. And then it looks like in year 2, his confidence, I mean, he wasn't the same person. He wasn't the same receiver. I think Mekhi Lemon is just a way better version of Branch, in my opinion. But should we move on to the next award?
Yeah. Here, let me pull it up. Yeah, just while just a little fill during that. It's just kind of crazy that people think that Branch is like actually better than Mekhi Lemon, Jacoby Lane for that matter either. It's like, where is here? It is. Okay, let's share my screen here again. Let's head to the defensive side though, because the only guy nominated for anything so far, I don't know if all the awards have come out, but Eric Gentry for the Butkus Award. This feels very fair because Gentry, when he is on the field, is phenomenal. He is. I just think to that LSU game, and did he play Michigan? No, he was out Michigan. That was one of the biggest problems. But that LSU game, he was fantastic. Just that's the reason LSU had like one break-off run, but other than that, they weren't great in the run game. He was stopping them. He wasn't really getting the Nussmeier, but he was stopping people at the line. He was fantastic, and obviously he's great in the pass game, so long and lanky. Casey, how do you feel that he's nominated for this?
Yeah, I mean, I think like he's the most, I'm not going to say the MVP necessarily, but he is the most valuable player to this defense from a jack of all trades standpoint, because he can do everything. Really, he can get to the quarterback, he can stuff the run, he can break up passes. So I think for what the value he brings to the team, I think he's one of the most valuable players USC has had, the past year or so. And going into this year, I think, again, like you said, I have to agree. It's very fair. The Big Ten had a lot of players nominated to this list. 12 guys from the Big Ten were named to the Butkus Award preseason list. I could share my screen if you want to see the full list.
Sure,
I have it pulled up. Yeah, well, I mean, do you have anything to say while I pull it up? I think, we're probably in agreement here. It's a very fair assessment.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think EG's only problem is it will be staying healthy, because that has been his problem basically every year of his career. Definitely while he's been at USC here. I'll add your thing here. Sorry, I caught you off guard there.
Very good.
Yeah, this has really been his only problem is staying healthy. So yeah, Harold Perkins, LSU, that's a guy who should be a lot better than he is. Jalen Sneed, Notre Dame, Anthony Hill, those will probably be the front runners. Anthony Hill will probably be the front runner if I had to guess. He's the betting
Vaughn
odds.
Jackson. Yeah. It's a lot of spread out. A lot of, Big Ten, SEC, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But I think it speaks to something bigger that USC, with how good the Big Ten is defensively across the board, USC has to adapt at a certain point. And, like you said, I don't know if the other award lists have come out yet, but I would be very shocked if Kamari Ramsey wasn't nominated for something. So
Yeah.
I definitely agree with you there. Let's see, is there any opponents? Purdue.
Jalen Sneed at Notre Dame. He's great.
Yeah, he's great.
Sonny Styles, he'll be another favorite. Forgot to mention him.
Al Smith at Michigan. Yeah, there's some guys at USC will have to deal with, because these are players that are game wreckers. I said it about Eric Gentry. These players are sort of the jack of all trades that USC didn't have most of the season with Eric Gentry injured. USC's linebackers last year without Gentry struggled a lot. Mason Cobb is not necessarily a super reliable player, week in, week out. I think this year they have a lot more depth in the middle. I think Eric Gentry is going to, have a big resurgence. He's a guy that's pushing for the NFL.
Yeah, 100%. I'm just trying to think. It's the Lott Award, and it's carefully is significantly named after, of course, USC great Ronnie Lott. I think Kamari Ramsey could be up there. I do want to contest one thing, just a tiny bit, that you said, just about EG being one of the most important. I'm not the MVP is the words you used of the defense, and you said jack of all trades. So this does change it a little bit. I do think Kamari Ramsey is the most important player on the defense. He was the signal caller last year as a safety. That's not common. And maybe part of that was because, Gentry's missing time. But I think Ramsey also does everything, because he can play in coverage. He can also lay the boom. I think to that, was it Wisconsin game, where he just laid out a running back in the flats. I think Kamari Ramsey is the most important player to this defense.
I don't totally disagree with you, but I will say, like, if we're looking at last year, USC also had Jalen Smith in the secondary. I guess they also had Mascarenas Arnold in the linebacker core. But so I think they're very close. They also had Achille Arnold in the secondary too.
I was going to say they had another Arnold in the secondary.
Yeah. So I think considering how bad their defensive line was, not that Eric Gentry is a D lineman, but he could still stuff the run.
Yeah, a lot of run support.
Yeah, so he made that very valuable. I'm not saying he's necessarily the MVP, like he's the the end all be all, give him a trophy. But I'm saying he's probably the guy that, like, if he goes down again, knock on wood that doesn't happen, USC is going to be in a lot of trouble because he's a guy that just, Kamari Ramsey's great too, but I feel like the depth at the secondary has been slightly better these past few years than the depth in the middle. So it's just one thing to think about.
I do think year 2 of like Desmond Stevens though is going to be fantastic.
Yeah.
So I do think that helps in guys like that. I think that's going to help in the linebacking core. Casey, there's one more award that I want to highlight really quickly. And, I do think that this is the most important award of any. This is more important than the Heisman Trophy. It's really more important than anything. And of course, I'm referring to the Lou Gorza Award watch list. Kate Chittenden. I mean, if I don't have another guy, a back-to-back special teams nomination or special teams winner like Eddie Czaplicki last year, then I don't know. I don't know what we're doing anymore, Casey.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard a lot of good stuff about this guy, Cade Chittenden, and it's huge because USC, I mean, if we're being honest, they lost a lot of games by not to quote Lincoln Riley or anything, but they lost a lot of games by like 1 or 2 plays, and sometimes those plays were missed field goals. The Penn State game, you could point to that. So to bring in a guy has such high praise after Michael Lance last year, who struggled quite a bit, and then Dennis Lynch the year before, who also struggled quite a bit.
Michael Lynch was an upgrade over Dennis Lynch. I will say that.
Wasn't saying much, but yeah. So I honestly think, you're going to have a lot of close games that are decided by a 45-yard field goal on the road, wherever that may be. This is the guy that you want to kick it, So I think this is a lot better of an upgrade, and I'm excited to finally see USC potentially have some really consistent scoring from their kicking unit.
Yeah, 100%. I do. All I want is a consistent kicker who can just hit, 25 of 27 on the year and for consistently hits 35 plus, which that feels like a lot because the number one rule when it comes to special teams in college, Casey, college kickers, what do? They miss. So there is always that. But Casey, I think the last thing we want to touch on really quickly, it's an article that you found from Alicia de Artola for Fansided, and it is 3 harsh questions keeping USC football out of the top 25. I'm going to share my screen again right here. But before seeing, I don't know how much of you read of it. What do you think the harsh questions would be?
I 100% honestly did not read it or look at it yet. So I think
okay, perfect.
Yeah. So I honestly think
I read it. I saw the questions.
So just to rephrase it, it's 3 harsh questions we need to ask you, or some people need to ask USC before the season starts, or can you reread it?
3 harsh questions about USC. Can this guy do this?
Okay. I think number 1 obviously is Jaden Mayava. I think he's going to be talked about. Is he really legit? Is he as advertised? It's tough. I think maybe the defense again, just because it's only year 2 under Danton Lynn. And then the third one, maybe just Lincoln Riley's inability to win games at USC so far, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Close. You were pretty close. So the first one is Jaden Mayava the guy. That's a pretty big one. The second one here, can Eric Gentry stay healthy? We kind of just talked about that. And the third, can the USC offensive line be functional? So let's talk about that here. I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. Let's go back to the first one. Jaden Mayava, is he the guy? I've seen a lot of hype. I've seen a lot of people negative on Jaden Mayava on the interwebs. I do not know what to think. Because we've talked about this. He's budget Caleb Williams. You look at him, you think, all right, that might be Caleb Williams. You look a little further, you realize that is definitely not Caleb Williams. Just because of his play style, of what he does, you kind of think it's Caleb. Then he does something, it's like, all right, nope, Caleb never would have done that. So that's kind of what I think about that.
That's a very good point. I've thought about that in a similar way, but it's honestly kind of funny the way you phrased it. Just the optics are great. Like the optics are like, wow, look at this guy. He can sling the ball really far. You know, he can roll out, he can run. But the decision making, which he's actually been asked about in practice these past few weeks, the decision making has not really been there. It's been very lackluster. It was bad the first week he came in. It was really bad in the final game of the season against Texas A&M. They somehow win that game, but it was not necessarily because of Mayava. I not to be negative on the guy. I really like Jaden Mayava. I think he's a very good quarterback, but I think that is a harsh question that's somewhat fair. I think questioning, is he the guy? It's not asking, is he a good quarterback? It's, is he the guy? Is he the guy that can make that extra play, that can do stuff even if the offensive line isn't necessarily there to support him? So I agree. I think he's a really flashy, exciting player, and I think he can win USC some football games and will. But is he going to take the next step to be a guy that could lead USC to the CFP? I just don't know yet. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know, because I don't know if he can lead them to the CFP, especially just because, like we said, all the things negative that Caleb Williams did, he does more of, and he does less of the positive things. Which of course that's a really hard standard. I'm not judging him for that, but I just don't know if we can really trust him. So I think that's a fair question. Another one to bring up Chris is, can the O-line protect this year? Can the D-line get negative plays? That is a great one, because as much as USC's defensive line and defense was better last year, they got no pressure on the quarterback and they could not get negative plays. They very rarely got to the running back in the backfield before he got past the first level, I will say. As soon as they can stop the running back from getting not past the linebackers, obviously, getting to the linebackers untouched is what I'll say. Getting to the second level untouched, then that'll start to be showing an elite defense is what I think.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think that's the biggest thing. We saw a lot of changes philosophically with the defense, especially tackling and strength. So yeah, nothing else to add to that. But I do have a question for you, actually.
Okay.
It felt like at this point last year, there was some hype about USC potentially making the CFP, kind of the same as now, because of, the schedule wasn't easy last year, but people were really believing in Miller Moss. Do you think the hype around Miller Moss going into his first year as a starter versus Jaden Mayava this year going into his first year as a starter, what's the difference to you? Is the hype the same? Is it different?
God. No, dude. Everyone believed in Miller Moss, and everyone wanted to believe in Miller Moss. Obviously, his first start, he throws 6 touchdowns. There's pretty much no better way you can do it. As we've talked about, it was one of the worst 6 touchdown games of all time. Not to say it was a bad game, but it was a lot of work was done by the receivers on some of those touchdowns. He played good, but it was not fantastic. The hype was so much higher. You look at that. They were ranked preseason 23. They're playing LSU in Vegas for the first week. The hype is just immensely higher. You think, okay, you know what? Caleb Williams gone, but USC may have a defense now. That is what was going into that one. Going into this year, it is now, is Lincoln Riley actually going to win games at USC? That is what people are thinking, because his record is he's 26-14, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right? 26-14?
I don't know off the top of my head, but that sounds about right.
It's 27-14. It's something around that. Something not fantastic. Something where it is not worth $100 million. The hype is no longer there, is how I see it. I am not going into this season obviously I'm excited. I want to see college football. I love USC. I am worried more than excited, though, because I just feel like USC is once again going to be the laughing stock of the Big Ten, where it's like, okay, they forced their way out of the Pac-12 for, it made sense to get the bag. They now kind of have a defense, but Lincoln Riley, what's he doing? So I'm more worried than anything that USC is just going to be the laughing stock of the Big Ten, while the Washington, I think, is going to be pretty good with Damon Williams, Jonah Coleman. I think they're going to be pretty fun to watch. What are they doing? Obviously, the Ohio States, the Penn States, 25-14. Thank you, Chris. I am worried more than excited. I just talked for so long there, but go on.
No, you're good. I mean, to your point about the hype, I mean, USC doesn't have a sort of prime time type of game till the 5th game of their season. Illinois, their first 4 games. I mean, you could say the same about 2023, but they had Caleb Williams. Last year, they had LSU week 1. And not only does USC win in Vegas, but Miller Moss is the best player in the country in week 1. Like it looked like this guy could really shake some heads this year, turn some heads, excuse me. So I honestly think the hype started before the season started, and it got to their heads after that week 1 game where they USC seriously looked like a CFP type of team that game. If you took that game in a vacuum, USC was special. Obviously things went downhill, but I think we talked about this a little bit last week. I believe USC is not battle tested until the 5th game, maybe, or the 6th game of the year. They Michigan after playing Illinois, heading into October. The Illinois USC game is going to be the first one that have people watching. Both teams could be ranked. You don't know. I see your grimace. I say might be because it comes down to how convincingly USC beats teams like Purdue and Michigan State. If they're only winning by 1 touchdown, then yeah, they're not going to be ranked. Illinois, sort of a similar story with how their schedule is. But
they'll be preseason top 15, I bet, and I bet they'll go into that.
Yeah, 4. Yeah, probably. I mean, Illinois doesn't have any easy. They have Indiana the week before. That's the only team that they should be.
Not Indiana. That's not, and Duke. That's at Indiana and Duke. Darian Menza, Fernando Mendoza. Those are not easy games.
Yeah.
And you look back, I think the biggest criticism of Illinois and why teams totally could beat them is because they played a lot of 1-score games. And this is my criticism with Arizona State too. It is really hard to replicate like a 10-win season when you won 6 of those by 1 score. Yeah. It is really hard to do that. So I think that's probably the biggest criticism of Illinois. I do think they could be better than last year. And I think Bielema is a good coach. I think Altmaier is a pretty good quarterback. But it's kind of hard to do that again.
You talk about poor decision making with Maeva, and then you bring up Darian Menza.
Darian Menza is a dog. That's the $8 million man.
No, he's good, but the decision making at Tulane was just pretty bad last year across the board. A lot of late game interceptions. They could have beaten
there, but as a true freshman throwing for almost 3,000 yards, 22 touchdowns. I mean,
no, he's good, but if they needed to win one of those big games early in the year, and he threw some late picks. I believe they played Oklahoma and one other team in the SEC. But
this isn't
yeah. Sorry, if we're going to talk about Tulane, we would go back to the Cotton Bowl, which we don't want to talk about. So
we're not doing that.
We are not doing that. But I guess to sort of we're coming up on over the halfway mark or half hour mark, excuse me. Is there anything just sort of about the team that you wanted to talk about as we close things out? And we talked about the sort of the hype level just now with this team going into week 1. It's definitely a lot different. Feels like USC is underrated for the first time in a while. Like it felt like last year the hype was about fair, and then the Caleb Williams era, obviously, he's the Heisman, so he's going to get talked about a lot. Feels like not many people are talking about USC outside of LA. In my opinion.
I actually disagree with that. I don't know. I've seen a lot of people talk about USC, and it's on the spectrum of either USC is underrated and they're going to do something and like shake some people up, or it is USC is once again going to disappoint and Lincoln Riley is going to be fired, which we're not going to fire him because I don't think we can afford to. That is all I'm seeing. And I hate that the past couple of years it has just been, is USC going to win 9 games? Or are they going to win 6 games? That is a terrible place to be in. It's horrible because the most likely option is they win 6 games. That happens 9 times out of 10.
And I think this is a fair comment by Kristen, because I think also, you looked at last year, people were expecting that offense to just be the same level of production as the Caleb Williams offense, which maybe the optics of it going into the year made it seem that way. But you have Miller Moss and a pretty downgraded receiver. Well, I wouldn't say downgraded, but you have a receiver room that's less experienced.
Mhm.
going from, Taj Washington, Brendan Rice to younger guys. It's just not gonna
Like
it's not gonna
sophomore,
average
yeah.
40 points. It's just not gonna
Yeah.
happen. But yeah, I do agree with you. I think they're being talked about less than usual is what I was trying to say.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like people are super high on USC across the board. There is a lot of negativity, like you said, and there are a lot of people that are confused. And once more, a lot of people that it feels like, have they watched USC football before? We talked about that with Zachariah Branch, but a lot of people question the defense, for example, when it's a fair thing to question just because it's only going to be year 2 of Danton Lynn, but they took some significant strides last year. And the guys he brought in last year, I'm sure the guys he's going to bring in this year, you mentioned Desmond Stevens going from year 1 to year 2, guys like that, it's going to be something that is going to be really developed. I think going into the season that we didn't necessarily see them do all that much last year just because it was year 1, So I think that's one thing that I think is slept on a lot.
Yeah. I think the final thing that I will say before we wrap things up here, you mentioned USC not being talked about that much. That is not where the program should be. USC should be one of the top conversation points of every single offseason. It is way too good a program for that to be happening. It is disappointing that we have fallen into this trend of either being not talked about enough or they're talked about too much in a bad way. They should be talked about every single offseason of what they're going to do. It is way too good a program to be in the middle of the Big Ten. That is just the reality of it. And obviously, going from the Pac 12, from the Pac 10, Pac 12, whatever, to the Big Ten, it's a pretty big difference in the style of play. You still need to be talked about by coaches, media, whoever it is outside of us, every single offseason a lot. That is what I think. And I think the place that the program is at right now is not a good state. It is not good that people can't decide whether USC is going to be great, going to be bad, but they're not talking about them that much. They need to be talked about. And I know that sounds weird to say, but they need to be talked about more.
Yeah, and I think like the biggest topic of conversation around this team is Lincoln Riley on the hot seat? Should Lincoln Riley be fired? And we've talked about that before, but it feels like the mainstream media loves to talk about that just because of his contract, because he came to USC sort of with the promise. And it sort of felt like that has not been closely met at all. To be honest, it felt like it's been very disappointing. I don't think I have to tell you that. It's very clear. So I think that, to your point, speaks to that low point. If your biggest conversation is should your coach be fired, mid-season or in the offseason, I think it's very concerning. And I think I don't know how that hasn't motivated Lincoln Riley to do more. He has done a lot this past offseason. He brought in some good players, but he is going to have to make a statement if he wants his job to be secure. Not just that, but his reputation. Like Lincoln Riley is coming into USC was so respected. I know he didn't necessarily have the playoff success, but it feels like his reputation has gone a complete 180 since coming to USC, or I guess the post Caleb Williams era, or maybe after year 1 of Caleb Williams, because they still were a CFP contender that year. So I just think it's one of those things that the program needs a culture shift, and it's felt like they've done that already with the new facility, with the local recruiting, but there's more that has to be done.
100%. Lincoln Riley left Oklahoma basically like in the middle of the night and came to USC. And I do think what we are seeing, the recruiting, all sorts of stuff, finally going on the California recruiting trail, is starting to pick up. And as Chris mentions, yes, he inherited a complete mess at USC. It was completely different from what he got at Oklahoma. That team had won 10, 11 games the year he took it over. Completely different from USC. That being said, it has taken a while to get going. And we've talked about it before. He kind of prioritized winning now rather than building for the future back when he did with Caleb Williams and Jordan Addison, all those guys. And they are headed in the right program, which is why I think you can't fire him or anything like that. But USC is always going to be talked about in a negative light until he starts to actually win those games. I still think he needs to win at least 8 or so games for USC to be considered a serious program once again by like national media.
Yeah, and I mean, if you fire Lincoln Riley, I think a lot of people don't really understand the repercussions. Like USC will have to completely factory reset their entire team if that happens, because guys are going to transfer out. You're going to lose all the recruits. You're basically going to have to go back to square one. And unless you bring in a celebrity coach like a Nick Saban or someone who can, completely turn around the program, which that was sort of a joke. I don't actually think Nick Saban would come, but a guy like that, a well-respected, type of guy, you're screwed at that point. I mean, we're seeing what's happened to UCLA. I don't think, Chip Kelly to Deshaun Foster is that big of a downgrade, but I think at the end of the day, look at Chip Kelly.
I think it's a pretty good big downgrade. It's a guy who went to a national title with Oregon compared to a guy who had been a running backs coach his entire life.
That's years ago, though. I'm talking about recently. Chip Kelly in 2023 was not a good coach. He was talked about getting fired even before the USC game that last week.
He's still better than Deshaun Foster. I'll stand by that.
Well, yeah, I think Deshaun.
You kind of cut out and muted yourself, Casey. I cannot hear you. Okay, I'm going to answer some of these comments while Casey figures that out. Yes, ESPN Feinbaum. I completely dislike Paul Feinbaum. That dude is the worst. The SEC is so far. Can't say. Casey, try talking.
Can you hear me again?
Yeah.
Cool. Sorry. What I was just trying to say is, I think that my point is, if you go from one mediocre coach to another one, that was my point with UCLA. I'm not saying necessarily one is much better than the other. You were going to have issues. So unless USC has this star, power sort of replacement for Lincoln Riley, you can't fire him. But looks like
exactly like this right here. Like,
I'm gonna say,
you're not gonna fire. Like, it's also another thing they can't afford to fire him. Whether I have very much lost a lot of faith in Riley and his play calling. I have been off his offensive mastermind for a while, but I do want to see the players he brings in and just the overall. This isn't a make or break year for him. Obviously, this is a prove it year, in my opinion, and that's not a bad thing if he doesn't. It is actually. I think if they win 6 games again, that's terrible. But
I mean, our point here, like, we have our reservations and concerns about the whole Lincoln Riley coaching, getting fired to portion of it. Do you think like they realistically, like we don't think they'd fire him, but do you think realistically like that could happen? If let's say they go 7-5,
really bad. 7-5, no, I don't think they fire him at 7-5. 5-7, yes, they'd have to be really bad. I think under 500, yes, and I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah, and I mean they haven't necessarily finished under 500 with him yet, so he's been skidding. They've been close. They have been close. Yeah, they've been skating on thin ice, I guess. But I guess, we don't necessarily interact with Jen Cohen a whole lot. But what's your thoughts on her regarding football? I mean,
I like her.
She's somewhat new.
She clearly cares about football a lot. And I don't necessarily think that she would be fired before Riley because she didn't bring him in. But I think she's a good AD, obviously, managing football, other sports, all sorts of that stuff. She's fine. I don't have that many thoughts on her, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I like the Musselman hire on the basketball side, but
of course,
it's not a bad, position to be in if you're her, because it does look like the teams are on the up. But yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be to sort of, I mean, we're sort of, a little bit over time here, but I mean, if there's any other things you wanted to talk about, I
comment real quick because Chris, to be honest, this is a hot take. A ceiling, a floor of 9-3. I respect your confidence. Casey and I don't think are so confident. I think we've talked about this before. My ceiling, I want to say, is 10-2. I think floor probably 7-5.
I could see a ceiling being 11-1. I could see it if you beat Oregon.
Yeah, I was about to say I think Oregon's more likely a win than Notre Dame, so I could see that, but I think more likely 10-2 is a ceiling, and I think they could make the playoff with that. Honestly,
yeah, no, they.
And that's also a super plausible Big Ten championship if they go 10-2 because that one loss in the conference.
So I'm saying this sort of jokingly, but given the fact that we we talk about our record predictions, we just immediately write off the Notre Dame game like, oh, that's a loss. Is that the way it should, like, and then but then also like the sort of juxtaposition of like it's an automatic loss, but we need to keep playing them every year. I'm not saying they shouldn't play them every year. I love the rivalry, but there's that sort of like tug of war is what I'm looking for happening. Like USC loses to them every year, but we have to play them every year. That's just, to me, it's funny because we talk about the guaranteed losses on the schedule. And even though none of the losses are actually guaranteed, but the one that feels the most guaranteed is the Notre Dame loss every year, or game every year, excuse me.
Yeah, it is. Like, I mean, both Oregon and Notre Dame, USC hasn't won in South Bend in, I think, 12 years, and they haven't won in Eugene in 14, excuse me. I just that's my problem with it. I can't confidently say they're going to win those because they haven't won there in forever. And of course, Oregon, it does kind of skip a year every once in a while. So it's more like the last 7 or so times they've played in Eugene, something like that. But it's still I can't confidently put them as beating either of those teams.
It's fair. Yeah. I mean, it's tough. It's one of those things where no matter how good Notre Dame is, and this feels like a much weaker iteration of Notre Dame this season than we've seen.
True.
Even though their defense is still going to be very good, but they still have Jeremiah Love. I'm more referring to the quarterback position. It's more of a battle than we've seen these past few years. But well, I mean, not necessarily a battle, but more of a
CJ Carr's got a lot, I think. Yeah,
less of a surefire thing. Yeah,
they didn't bring in a transfer for Marcus Freeman's tenure. Yeah. Yeah, Chris, you do make a fair point. They had an offensive lineman who I forget his name, might be out for the year. The really only thing that, obviously their defense is pretty good. It's Jeremiah Love. We got to just be honest about that for a second. That guy is the best running back in football. I mean, let's just be honest about that. That's what terrifies me, especially for a USC defense. Couldn't stop him at all. I mean, I can replay this in my head right now of being in the student section of the Coliseum last year, watching that man jump 12 feet over Kamari Ramsey. I can just imagine that right now. So that's why I have my reservations.
Fair. Yeah. I mean, it's, and then, you talk about the other losses because we said 9, if 9-3 is the ceiling, I feel like, or the floor, excuse me, in that evaluation, it feels like it's just always those 3 games that are being talked about: Illinois, Oregon, Notre Dame. And it feels like the rest of the games feel like a lot of people are saying are automatic wins. So,
I'm going to do, the thing is, Nebraska's not an easy game playing in Lincoln. Yeah. Iowa isn't necessarily going to be easy. I think Gronowski's not a bad quarterback at all. I've kind of changed a little bit on him. I think he's going to be better than some people think. And of course, their defense is going to be good. Unfortunately, I have to wrap things up here, though, Casey. This is going to be our last episode, 10 a.m. on Fridays. We're going to start doing them at more normal times for shows like this, like the 7 p.m.s West Coast time. So, Casey, any final thoughts before we head out?
Yeah, make sure to follow us on Twitter. It's just our names across, what you see on the screen right now. You can also follow the Voice of College Football, but our names are usually on that bar. We're working to get a new graphic made, but really appreciate everyone who commented, chimed in. This is a bit of a longer episode. We love talking as much as we can, and we'll have a better time coming up that more people will be able to tune in. So appreciate you guys again.
100%. All right, everyone, have a good day and fight on.